Travis, welcome back to the podcast. I'm sorry that you're here for the reasons that we're going to talk about. I would rather have you here on, a different occasion, different reason. But anyways, good to see you.
Yeah,
welcome back.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me back. I'm excited to hang and just kind of, not worry about my situation that much for an hour.
So let's walk through this. Just briefly from my experience, I was down in Pasadena and Altadena. I was in Pasadena for the Rose Bowl parade, and you and I connected. You came and picked me up. We went to a coffee shop in Altadena. Then we went over to your house to your studio out in the garage, and hung out, talk shop, looked at stuff, listened to stuff. And then I came home. And the next thing I know, your studio burnt down, as did, a large portion of Los Angeles.
Many studios, many houses, that coffee shop. Yeah.
The text you sent me, dude, the coffee shop that we were at, that and all the businesses around it are gone. It was one thing for your studio to burn, which that was huge, but I guess it kind of gave me a little bit of an insight into the scope of the fire, how far it went, and the impact.
Yeah, it's mind blowing, right? It's like it's absolutely catastrophic up there, and just to kind of lay out what my wife and I thought when we heard there was a fire that night on it, I think it was January 7th, we were like, well, we've got a toddler. My wife is pregnant. Let's just go get a hotel so we don't have to worry about it. But we're so far from the mountain that there'd never be fire here. And the next morning we woke up and that was not the case. There was, houses and structures and schools and businesses burning more than a mile from the mountain's edge, probably 2. Just absolutely mind blowing that there could be a fire where there was fire. So yeah, it was pretty heavy. I don't know if you want any of the details, but
you get word that there's fire. So you go to the hotel, and take us from there. Take us from the moment you realized that there was a problem.
It was that super windy day, right? That everybody was talking in California and LA about how windy it was going to be. It was 100-mile-per-hour gusts. And Altadena is pretty windy, just in general. When the Santa Anas roll through, they're pretty heavy. But this time, my fence blew over at 10 a.m., early in the day. And my fence has obviously never blown over. So it's crazy that actually happened. And now that I think about it, where my fence is, the fact that it blew over tells you that the wind was blowing in a different direction, because the wind was blowing over the mountains and down the hill, which is ultimately why this was such a disaster. Normally the winds would be a little bit more east-west. And so that night we were putting our daughter to bed, and somebody texted, "Hey, there's a fire." And then I looked out the window, and we've had a fire up on this hill before. There's been a couple fires up on the hill. So usually they knock it down, but there's nothing you can do when it's already dark and it's 80, 90, 100-mile-per-hour winds. And then a friend of ours texted us and said that a helicopter flew over his house and said, "Leave." So they were just flying over houses saying, "Evacuate immediately." And he's I don't know, 1.5 miles from us. And we actually never got an evacuation warning. We just decided to leave. And so we were like, let's just, for peace of mind, let's just take our daughter. Let's get out of here. Let's go get a hotel, whatever. We can get a good night's sleep. And so we left. And it's crazy. Altadena is such a small place. There's people in that hotel that I recognize, people I'd seen at the library, people I'd seen at coffee shops. And so that place was just full of people. And we watched the news that night, and it seemed like the fire was going east. And so we were kind of okay, it's going east, but then it was burning structures. in that direction. But we were west of it. So cool. We're going to be okay. Everything's fine. And then, like I said before, like the idea that a fire would get to where we live is like absolutely mind blowing. Absolutely mind blowing. And so when we woke up the next morning, different story. First thing I did was grab my phone, flip the news up, and news was not a good source of information because there was so much stuff going on. They were just pretty far behind. So the reality of what was going on, to my understanding from talking to people, is that areas around my house were burning maybe as early as midnight, 11. There was no evacuation warning for my house until 5:30 in the morning after there'd been multiple reports of fire. Things were moving so fast that nobody could really keep up with what was going on. So when we woke up in the morning, I flipped the news on. Once I realized that structures and houses were burning, I told my wife, I was like, let me go. Like, we didn't take anything, right? We didn't take social security cards, or I didn't take hard drives, like nothing. We were like, let's take 2 nights clothes because we're going to be back tomorrow morning, maybe 2 days, right? And so she was like, yeah, let's do it. Go back. I'll stay here with our daughter. And I turned the news on, and my street is on the news, burning on the news, like below our street, so further from the mountain. Anybody that's not familiar with wildfires, it's for some reason always seems to be a mountain involved, and that because there's park, and so it'll burn up in there, and then it works its way down. So when I say further away from the mountain, it means more shocking that it would burn. And so I just like looking at that street, like houses down the street from us, structures down the street from us were burning with this like news reporter standing in front of them, and I was like, okay, I guess it's clearly not safe for me to go back. And so we decided to go to my in-laws, which they live down outside San Diego. And so we just packed up and we left because we didn't know what to do. Like I said earlier, my wife's pregnant. The air quality in Pasadena was horrible, all over Los Angeles. It smelled like smoke inside our hotel, which was miles and miles away from Altadena. So we just got out of there. And we left not knowing if we had a house, but kind of assuming that we didn't. Because just the scope of what we were seeing was, it really didn't make you feel like there was any hope. And so we left. So we spent that day down outside San Diego in a small town watching the news. And we just watched national news, local news, and we saw everything, like the commercial area that you mentioned. We saw all of that stuff burning on the news. There's a church next to us, like basically our neighbor. It was burning. And the news reporter was there saying that embers had lit a house, a couple houses up on fire. And they panned just short of being able to see our house. All we could see was a bunch of smoke. And at that point we were like, oh my God, that must be our house. The reality is that was maybe the preschool next to us or my garage, which was the studio, as you mentioned. So we went that whole day not knowing whether we had a house. And so the next morning, my brother-in-law was going up to work early, 4:00 in the morning. And so he got up there 4:00 in the morning before the police had closed everything. And he texted us and he was like, your house is there. The garage is not. And so at that point, I just decided, now I'm going. Like, it's significantly safer. I mean, there was like, it's probably a horrible idea to go, but it was better than that previous day. So I went up there to just get whatever I could. And I cruised up there, got to the highway patrol, and police had set up barricades. So you couldn't get into the burn zone. Obviously, because they wanted first responders to be able to move. Looting was an immediate problem. I've heard stories about people getting their house emptied, like while the power was out, and the day after the fire, like moving truck rolling up, and having all of their belongings emptied. I mean, that's crazy to me. Like, why would you even do that? But that's the kind of things that were going on. So we got there. We couldn't get to the house. We couldn't drive to the house. We had to walk up the hill. I brought a bunch of water with me because my brother-in-law had told me there was a small fire in the garage that he like threw some like water bottles on. And I was like, you know what? There's no running water anymore. So let's take some gallons of water in case we need to put a fire out, because I'm going to save this house if it's the last thing I do. Like if there's a fire in my yard, I'm going to get in there and jump up and down on it. And so my father-in-law and I went up there, got the things that we needed, the things that we should have taken in the first place. I got to have a moment of silence at the studio. And yeah, we just grabbed what we needed to. And then my father-in-law wanted to head back. I didn't feel like I was done yet, but we had left a car there, which was absolutely, just filled with smoke. I can't believe it ran. Like the bumper was melting, and the side view mirror was kind of like a little melted. And we loaded that up so we could drive out of the closed off area with all the stuff we brought. And then we got to the car that we'd driven originally. And I told my father-in-law, why don't you go back, go home, take the stuff that we took, we took like all the meat out of the freezer, because I don't know, there's like a disaster, and we're like, we gotta save the steaks. And I was like, why don't you go home, take the stuff? I want to walk around, like I want to see my city, and I want to just like move these leaves away from the house, because there was piles of leaves next to the house. The fact that my house is standing, like there's like chunks of ash, like brick-sized chunks of burnt wood on top of dried leaves, and I will never, until the day I die, understand why those piles of leaves did not set on fire. So I just spent a couple hours moving everything away, and then, with a mask on, luckily, but have since realized the amount of toxins that were in the dust that I was just like sucking, because I had no garden tools. They were in the shed that burnt. I'm just like, kicking things. But I was about to leave, and I felt like it was that moment where I was like, I guess I was supposed to stay here and move these leaves like a weirdo, because I was leaving my house, walking around the back. I was finally going to go home. I felt like I'd done everything I could do. And I heard that crackle of like a campfire. And I was like looking around, and I couldn't see it. And I realized that there was a fire starting up out of the ashes behind my garage in my neighbor's yard. I had 1 gallon of water left that I hadn't poured on leaves or poured on the studio. And so I ran over there, jumped over the fence, like landed in what I now know was hot ash because it hurt. And then just started throwing water on that little fire, and put that out as it was like starting to go up a tree. And then walked out to the front of my house, and there was a fire truck rolling by, and I just flagged them, and I was like, hey, I don't know if this is something you guys can address, but I just put a fire out. And they were from Northern California. I can't remember where. And they'd just gotten to town, and their job was to do that. It was to cruise around, look for hot spots, check on anything that was like an open flame, most of which were like gas lines and stuff like that. And so they went back there and they raked that all out, sprayed water down on it. I told them about a couple other fires that I saw around when I was walking around. I was like, there's a fire over there. There's a little one over here. And so I'm just like thankful that those guys were cruising by at that time. But yeah, then I went home went back to where we were staying. And since then, we've just been waiting to get back in our house. We don't really have a timeline on when we'll go home, 6-9 months, just because the smoke damage is pretty horrible. We're going to have a newborn, and we're just not going back until it's properly cleaned, and the area needs to be cleaned. And yeah, so that was a long answer to your question, but that's kind of where we are now.
I just wanted to let you talk and tell the story. I got to say this, in situations like this, it's just, it truly is remarkable. Just first responders,
Oh yeah.
Fire people, police, like they only get credit when we have major disasters. I just hold those people in high regard. I can't imagine at all what you emotionally went through when you saw your space just gone.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, me neither. I think I've kind of like just shoved it all down deep inside. I'm just like holding on to it. But no, it's like you just get there, and when my brother-in-law told me that it feels different than when you get there, and I just sat there and cried for a minute. I mean, I'm not ashamed to say that, but our house is there. And, so many of our friends lost their house. Like most of our parent friends lost everything. And so, we're lucky that we have that house. It's our own like personal hell that we need to figure out how to clean it and figure out like, when we're going to live in it again. And then I have to go through permitting and building the studio. But like, we still have that, right? You still have those memories of like our daughter plays and runs around this circle and does this. And like, we can still one day go back to that. But yeah, no, the loss is I don't know. I've never had like a life-changing traumatic experience until now. And so I don't really, I guess it just takes time to process those things. Just moments of rage, moments of sadness. I mean, sometimes even moments of excitement of like, I don't have any gear. I can build whatever studio I want in whatever way I want that fits like my life now, 20 years into this. It's not like, because, when you have gear, you're like, well, I have to use this. And you start incorporating things that you have. Oh, and you have nothing. Like, it's like a clean palette. So yeah, it's wild. All of the emotions that you go through on a daily basis.
Well, in addition to all of it, I mean, first and foremost, I mean, there's the protector side of you, I'm sure, kicks in for your wife and your daughter, and the fact that your wife is on the verge of having kid number 2.
Any day
could happen right now.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll finish this.
Hopefully we'll get to the end. So I'll try to be brief, but so you have the emotions of that. Then you have, I'm sure, the emotions of, hey, our house is still standing, a little bit of guilt about that. But then large swaths of the neighborhood are gone. So you have to factor that in. What's that even going to look like down the road?
Yeah.
There's just so many layers to this onion that it's not just a simple loss of a spot, it goes so much deeper.
It really, I talked about it. I did a video and episode of my podcast where I kind of told the story a little bit, but I talked about Altadena like as a community, and it's, I've been in LA for 20 years and nothing has really compared to Altadena. It's mostly residential. There's a lot of like families that have been there for generations. It was one of the last affordable places around, where you were still like a stone's throw from LA. But the thing that really sticks with me about Altadena is I've never felt community anywhere else in LA. Like not when I lived in Hollywood, not when I lived in Highland Park, and no shade to those places, but just the people in Altadena are these people that have been there forever and they all know each other. And then there's all these like young families, so many people with kids. We go to the same park, which is still there. The park is okay, but there's not, I drove up there the other day, not a single house. Like if you go a couple blocks north of where I live, there is nothing. And I'm not exaggerating. There's nothing, no buildings a couple blocks north of me. So we're, lucky in that sense. But yeah, the community in Altadena is just like, it's like you're in a small town, but you're in LA and you can drive to the hip restaurants and it only takes you 15 minutes. It's like kind of the perfect place in LA. And I hope it goes back to being that way.
And from what I've been told, or what I'm to understand, is that Altadena was true working class, and a lot of the people behind the scenes of the entertainment world live there. Camera people,
Yep.
audio engineers, et cetera, like that. and lots of small studios from what I gather too.
Lots of I've met a lot of people that lost studios. I actually I've become friends with somebody who I didn't realize was in music, and my daughter plays with his daughter, and I just like had never actually talked to him, and then he popped up on Instagram as having lost his studio, and I was like, oh my god, I know that little girl, and I hit him up, and yeah, it's so many camera people, the DPs. It's all those people that have a career in entertainment and arts, and they've worked really hard to be able to afford something, and this is like the best place that they can take their family, and then you can get a yard, and so it's like really devastating because it is people that have worked really hard to get to this place, and then this place has just been taken away from them, and it's going to take years to build it back. But everybody I talk to says that they want to build. They want it to be the same. So hopefully it will be.
So in your particular case, obviously your house is smoke damaged, that your insulation, your drywall, your furniture, all of it's going to have to be replaced. That's going to take months. Obviously you're going to try to rebuild your studio. And so where you're talking to us from now, you've rented a place, and then you're moving ultimately to another place.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it really shakes up your routine. It changes everything because you don't have your comfort zones, the things and the places and the people that you come to rely on, excuse me, on a daily basis.
Yeah, it is. I think, I don't know, anybody that knows me personally or through my podcast knows that I'm like such a workflow person. Yeah. And it is crazy just to do this interview. Like last night I was getting ready for this and I was like, oh, I'll just plug this in, plug that in. And then I'm like, all good. And then, then you forget that all the settings that were on your studio computer are not on this computer. And then this isn't set up this way and that's not set up this way. And you just take for granted these like little things, like just when you have that space, you walk into a room that I've never been a headphone mixer either. Like I never really liked it. Everything is taking me way longer because now it's like I have to relearn because I don't know, you just forget. I walk into a room, I know what that room sounds like. I make decisions very quickly. I've got my keyboard, everything's where it's supposed to be. I've got my Stream Deck, even like just, Chris Shaw has those great utility programs in SoundFlow for like copy and pasting inserts and sends. And I was working yesterday and I was like, oh yeah, I'll just copy this over. And I was like, there's my Stream Deck. I don't have a Stream Deck anymore. And then you're like, oh, where's my Valhalla preset that I like for piano? I was like, oh wait, that's still on my Backblaze drive. I got to plug my Backblaze drive in and pull all my Pro Tools templates and settings over because those are over there. But which, if you want to talk about things that have saved my ass, we can talk about that. But yeah, it's crazy to be able to like be with my family, walk in the backyard, work, and then go back. That's going to be the true loss here. I mean, dollar value is one thing, but like my way of life ended and will not exist until I rebuild that studio. I think that's the biggest loss that I've felt for sure.
And something that maybe not everybody knows the reality of is the kids situation. So I have 2 kids. I've gone through this. You're about to have your second kid, but I mean, to have a newborn come into your life, that's a whole different focus and really benefits from foundational things being established.
Yeah.
And now all those foundational things are gone. The only thing that remains is, of course, you and your wife and the family you have. And I think that's going to be a tough road for the first, couple months.
It's going to be challenging. There's a podcast that I really love called Colin and Samir. They're like a creator podcast, and they both recently finished renovating or buying homes in Palisades, and they both lost their homes, and they're both expecting kids. And they did a really emotional episode, and it closed with one of them saying, and I'm trying not to cry when I say this. The guy a reporter interviewed him, and they were like, "You have a kid coming any day. Like, how does this affect that?" And he was like, "Well, our child doesn't have to know that this time even existed. Like, our job is to be the smiling face for those kids." And so I've taken that as kind of, that's my only job. I mean, I'm trying to do some work when I can, trying to work insurance when I can, but my job is to make sure that me and my wife have smiles on our face, and that our 3-year-old and our newborn are going to have a life that doesn't have to reflect the absolute pile of garbage that is happening around them. And I think we've protected them for the most part. I mean, obviously my daughter, every once in a while, she says, "There's no fire?" Because she saw fire when we were driving away, and that makes me sad that she remembers that.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, some might say, well, just move and, get out of there. But the loss of community, I think, that loss of your kids' friends and,
Yeah.
once again, all the comfort zone things that you've established, it's easy to say, oh, just move. Well, it's a lot harder than that, and it's more complicated than that. So, if you could maybe share some things that, as audio professionals, that we should be considering, because you're going through this right now. So, what are the things that we're all potentially neglecting or overlooking that we need to keep in mind? Because I'll tell you something. I don't care where you land on this concept, but the fucking weather's changing people.
Yeah.
We got hammered last night with so much rain that I was in shock at how much rain came down. I was outside just managing water left and right like I've never done before.
Yeah.
Or had to in the many years we've lived here.
Yeah.
So look, these things are going to continue to happen in different degrees. So what are the things we as audio professionals need to keep in mind? Tell us from your experience.
Well, the things that saved me are anything based on the cloud, like iLok Zero Downtime, programs like SoundFlow where all of your scripts are in the cloud. I use iCloud Drive for all of my invoices, receipts, like anything. I don't use my local drive. You know how you can like have the iCloud as part of your drive, right? All my files are in there. So that's great when you have two computers. That's why I started doing it, because it was convenient. I'd be in the house on the laptop and I could make an invoice and I could access a file. And then when your studio burns down and your computer melts and you grab your laptop on the way out the door, that's your tax stuff. That's, pictures of driver's license, pictures of social security cards, your birth, like that's all of your stuff. Those are the things that you're going to need. Like have important documents, music or other, somewhere where you can access them from your phone. I mean, the number of times I've had to like pull my phone out and try to find some tax return to prove that I lived somewhere so I could be applicable for some fund or some discount. Like so many vendors have come out, like, mattresses 30% off for people affected. I do have to say that the world has really come to help LA, and it's been so appreciative. And then Backblaze. So I've used Backblaze. I know you're a Backblaze fan, for years. And I had my podcast drive, my main audio drive, and my last two audio work drives up on there, along with everything in my Mac Studio. I did not have anything prior to maybe 3-4 years ago. So I lost, I would say 25 hard drives, maybe 26. I lost a lot of hard drives. The most important stuff I have, but I was in the process of building an archive, kind of following the system that you put together, Matt. I was waiting for these big archive drives to show up. They actually showed up the day of the fire, and I was going to start offloading everything to them and then connect that to Backblaze so that the whole archive could be on the cloud. And that didn't happen. But yes, Backblaze was great. I just went online, you order hard drives, you select what you want. They sent me 2 hard drives. The thing to remember though is that it takes a while. Like I thought it'd be overnight, but it's like a day for every 2 or 3 terabytes to like
for them to restore.
Yeah, for them to restore. So it took like about a week. So I told people, I was like, oh, I'm getting my files. I can do your recall. I mean, which, turns out I can't do a recall on my laptop because all the UAD stuff, and you forget, right? So yeah, cloud backup, have a backup that's not in your house. I enjoyed Backblaze because I'm crazy and it helped me sleep at night when we went on vacation. I never thought that I would actually use it because my studio burnt down. But so those things, all that stuff's super important. Insurance, take photos of everything. I know that people say that, but you get a piece of gear that you're going to insure, take a picture of it, save the receipt, put the picture and the receipt in the same folder, and then add that to your insurance. And if you don't have equipment insurance, get equipment insurance. And when you do that, don't do what I did and insure the important parts. Because you're like, well, if I go to a gig, somebody might steal this. If I do that, somebody might steal that. I never thought about total loss. I just thought about I need my Pro X. I'm going to insure my Pro X. I need my amp. I'm going to insure my amp. I need my Apollo. I'm going to insure my Apollo. And then you just forget about all the things you didn't insure. And the cables, stands. There's thousands of dollars worth of stuff that I lost that was uninsured by my equipment insurance just because I was like, who's going to steal my 30-pound Atlas stand? It's not about theft. It's about fire. So yeah, get insurance and then understand the insurance. I'm not going to have a rant about insurance, but the document that they send you about your coverage, whether it be your homeowner's insurance, your car insurance, is the 1-page summary. And so if you ever need to do something with insurance, you need to ask for the full language policy, because that really opens up what you're actually insured for. You actually understand what you are entitled to. So if you ever need to use it, make sure you get the full thing.
What about a go bag for your studio?
That's what I was about to say. Maybe you don't want to have a go bag because you're probably using those hard drives, but I think sit there and think about what you would take so that when you're in a hurry, you're not out there and your partner's like, why have you been in there for 45 minutes? You can just walk out there, grab your guitar, grab the 2 hard drives you want, grab the 3 or 4 things that you know you need, and then get out. We'll definitely have a proper go bag in our house for the rest of our life. I'm officially basically a doomsday prepper. I'm going to build a vault under my lawn. Start putting canned food in there.
Here's where my thinking is now I'm going to call my gear insurance people, and I'm going to get the full policy, and I'm assuming they're going to send that to me as a PDF. I'm going to load that into ChatGPT and say, please, absorb this so I can ask you questions, and ask it straight up. If I'm in a fire, will this cover me? Because I think that AI can help digest all of that, and you can have a conversation with it to find out what you're covered for based on the language and the policy.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been using ChatGPT, nonstop. Because our homeowner's insurance policy is 140 pages. It's crazy. My equipment policy is way shorter, but it's still 20. And it's a lot clearer, but it's really nice to be able to load it in there and ask questions. And then you can go through and kind of confirm the language yourself. You can read it. But when you go through a situation like this, I mean, your bandwidth for your time is just like, you just don't have a lot of time. And so being able to do exactly what you said has saved me so many times. And even just to have questions to ask other people, like, hey, it appears that this might be something that we can do. And they say yes or no, but yeah, just massively helpful to be able to ask those questions to ChatGPT, and then, load those things into what they call it, like a folder or something. So like everything's all referenced. So I've actually never really gotten results from ChatGPT that I thought were like super helpful until now. And I'm like, oh, I get it now.
There's another thing that might be helpful. I think it's notebook.google.com. And I'm going to give you an example.
Yeah.
If I take a bunch of news articles, YouTube videos, websites, it will gather all that information up. It will then, in the next set of columns, it will break it out into FAQs, study guides, timelines. It will generate a AI-based podcast, strangely enough.
I know, I've heard about that, yeah.
Where it's a man and a woman talking about something, and it will basically generate a lot of detailed information about the sources you're feeding it. So in the case of an insurance policy, you could load it in there. You could load all your insurance policies in there.
Yeah.
And then you could start looking at the FAQs, asking questions. You could really tear something apart, dissect it. Because let's face it, reading that language of that stuff the font is the size of an ant. And, if you're trying to read quickly, you'll go to sleep.
Yeah. 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 It's been immensely valuable. I haven't tried Notebook LM. I'll have to try that.
Is that what it is? Is it notebooklm.google.com?
Yeah, I don't know how to get to it. I just know it's called Notebook LM. But yeah, it's really, I still struggle with where AI fits into like my music workflow. Like now that I see the things that it can do, I'm like, man, I just want to figure out like, what's it going to do for me? And I know people are like, oh, it can write copy for your social media or whatever. But like, what's it going to do for my actual like audio career? Like, how's it going to make me finish something faster? That's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for that tool.
Also, and to be clear, I pay the monthly fee for ChatGPT 4.0 as opposed to the free version of 3.5. The newer version can scrape the web. It can access real-time information. And, if you're trying to do everything from, I don't know, what's an activity that you've needed to do really quickly or find out about your situation?
Oh, like process to rebuild something.
Right. You can start asking, lay out a comprehensive plan for me to, rebuild my studio, whatever.
I did a little bit of that. It's constant overwhelm over here, which is why these things have been great. The tools have been amazing.
Well, can we talk about the rebuild?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't want to get into the minutia of some things that, I know it's almost like you're in the middle of a court case. You're in the middle of a insurance thing where you're trying to navigate all that. Yeah. So let's go past all that for a bit. Let's just talk about, in the ideal world, once all this shit is settled, as far as your plans are concerned, have you started to formulate what it is you want to do with the studio rebuild?
Yeah, pretty much. So I know what I want to do. It's just, I think my next step is looking for an architect and reviewing how the permit structure will change, right? So, because you were at the house, the garage was basically on the property line. So I do have a fear that rebuilding it and changing it, I might have to move it and give it I think whatever the setback is, but whatever, that's another conversation. But the actual structure, the storage in our house is a huge issue. So now that there is no walls dictating the size, because it was a 2-car garage, I want to make it bigger. not a lot bigger, but like maybe like a 2.5 car garage. And I want to have a functioning, I want to still have a garage space, that can have tools in it and the lawnmower and stuff, like, instead of having the shed. And then the rest of it will be finished storage, essentially, just a drywalled room. And what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to do what I did last time, which was fabric walls. And, I reframed the room within the garage, put rock wool insulation everywhere, super dead, put nice fabric over top. It's a beautiful build. Sounded great, but it was permanent. And so now, with the state of the community, like, are we going to be there for 10 years? Are we going to be there for 3 years? Are we going to be there for, like, it's a little bit more up in the air of like what this area is going to look like. So I'm going to basically build the same thing that I had, except I'm going to do it with really nice panels that are like floor to ceiling, still make a really dead room, and just build something I can take with me. Because that is one of the only regrets that I had to my other space. I built what I wanted. I loved it, but I wasn't taking it with me. And so this time I want to build something I can take with me.
In the construction of the spot itself, will you use different materials, say cinder blocks, for example, or something to that effect?
I don't know. I mean, I know there's options to build with like fire resistant materials. There might be requirements to build with fire resistant materials. I do think I was talking to a couple people about this. The studio, there was so much rock wool in the studio because that's what I was using for sound treatment, that I think that actually made that garage, because rock wool, for anybody that's unfamiliar, burns slow. It like holds heat. I think that is why my house didn't burn down. I think that garage burned so slow that it did not travel down the fence to my house, because it was basically a box full of rock wool. And if you go there, there's still unburnt rock wool on the ground, just laying there. So I think that it having sound absorption in there actually might have saved my house. But yeah.
I'm sure that fire in down there is going to change so much.
Yeah. I mean, I hope it changes. I hope it changes things for the best. I think that, not somebody's going to take this as being political, but it's not meant to be political. The fire department in Los Angeles is underfunded, and that's a fact. I recently signed, I might have even complained to you about property tax. There was a thing that I voted for, which was for my property taxes to go up, because the LA County Fire Department went door to door to get signatures, because they didn't have enough money to do their job, and they couldn't get it from the city and the county and the state. And so and then this happens. So yeah, I hope that people become aware of the things that are happening to them, because 99% of the time your life is unaffected by what's going on around you and whatever your taxes and blah, blah, blah. Like, for the most part, you just go on. But then when something like this happens and you realize that there were fire trucks that were out of service and people showing up to work, but they couldn't go to fight fires. My wife knows 2 people who personally know firefighters that came to fight the Palisades or the Altadena fire and were sent home because there was no equipment. And so when you hear things like that, I hope a lot of things change. And so I hope people hear that and say, wow, I'm going to pay more attention to these things, like where cuts are coming from and where, like, what's being funded and how it's being funded. I just think local government is where you are impacted the most. And I think it's
100%
where you should focus. And, people get caught up in like the big picture, but really, like, if you're in a town of like 100 people and you guys can have a town hall meeting and talk about like hiring one more cop or whatever it is, like, that is like what's going to impact you. And so I just think that people don't realize that until it affects them. And luckily, you can go your whole life without it really affecting you. And I guess that is a statement for things working until they don't.
Yeah. I'm absolutely intrigued by what's going to happen in the building process. Like, what new things are going to be like the new trend, metal roofs, Are there going to be misters, like little tiny pipes? I know that I've been to a home in Arizona where it was so fucking hot that there were misters on the outside of the house to kind of cool everybody down.
That's amazing.
And I thought, wow, that would be a real interesting like fire suppression method.
Yeah.
Because it's not using a crap ton of water. It's just using a light amount. So if like a certain threshold was met on heat or fire recognition by an alarm, it would just be like, it would just start spraying out on the sides of the house.
Oh yeah. I think that stuff like that would be, because we know the tech exists. There are homes in Palisades and Altadena that are constructed and still standing that were built with wildfire survival in mind, metal roofs and stuff like that. So these things exist. It's just a matter of like, how common are they? And I think more importantly, when you talk about a community like Altadena, where every house was like very unique and very different, how can you take these safety technologies and then insert them into someone being able to build the house that they want? When I say metal roof to you, everybody just immediately thinks like some weird commercial metal roof. But if you could find a way to like make that be Spanish style and make that be English Tudor style, like let's take this tech and let it fit into, all different types of spaces. I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be intriguing to see what happens. I'm trying to see the bright side of things. Well, if you need any help or advice on the constructing of the backup, the archive, the systematic approach, happy to tell you what I know or figure all that shit out, because I'm sure that everything you do, being the person that I know you to be in terms of how you do things, you're going to do it really well and right. And it's going to be intriguing to observe from the outside.
Oh, I appreciate that. I definitely am thinking about everything differently now. That's for sure. And not like, not in like definitely not in a pessimistic way, but I definitely now have this understanding that the worst case can happen, and I'm very good at backing up. I've never lost files. Never lost a single file until I lost like 15 years worth. And because you just, you don't think that the worst thing's going to happen. So I guess that's like my advice, like I was getting back to earlier, like when you're planning what files are in the cloud and what hard drives are where, like just imagine the worst, because the more you can do to prepare for the worst case scenario, the better that situation is going to be. I mean, the amount of bandwidth I have to spend on like copying files, that's directly taking away from me taking care of my kids or looking for a new place for us to live. And so if you're in a situation like this, the more prepared you are, the better. And I'm a very prepared person, but there's a lot of things I would do differently, like I mentioned. But yeah, it's been a crazy roller coaster of an experience.
Hell of a journey. Yeah. Well, I have a link on workingclassaudio.com to Music Cares. I know that there's a lot of different things you could donate to, but I just felt that Music Cares was like the safe bet.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Music Cares was probably one of the fastest people to get aid out outside of FEMA and the Red Cross. So props for that organization being able to move that quick and have the funding. And I mean, I believe raised a lot of money during the Grammys as well, so they can continue to support people. But yeah, if you want to help Los Angeles or musicians, just Music Cares, I think, is a great place. Even when there's not a disaster, they're doing good work.
I don't mean to make light of any of it. I'm intrigued with what happens in overwhelming disasters like this, and how people recover, and watching your recovery and talking with you and meeting with you. Lid Shaw and I, of course, had coffee with you at NAMM, which was great. As we sat there and talked, Lidge was just like captivated, because he hadn't met anybody who had been directly affected by the fire, and he just wanted to let you just talk. And it was great for the three of us to just sit and hang.
Yeah, and I appreciated all of his suggestions too. He had some good ideas. There is something that I wanted to share with people, and I was going to do a social media post on this in the future when I'm like more separated. But something that I have learned being affected like this is everybody reaches out to help, right? Which is amazing. Like so many people people haven't talked to in like 25 years, like sending me $25 Target gift cards. But my wife and I talked about this. The most impactful thing you can do for someone when they're going through like some kind of traumatic experience, whether that be like a death in the family or an earthquake or whatever it is to not say, what can I do? To just do something. Because when someone is already overwhelmed with all these things and you say, what can I do? Like 99% of people are going to be like, oh, we're okay. But then if you're just like, hey, I made you dinner, can I bring it over on Thursday? Or like you are sending me a pair of headphones to use. You didn't. Yeah. You said, hey, I have a second pair. Do you want these? And I said, yes. If you would have asked me if there's something you could do for me, I would have not said, let me have your second pair of headphones. So I think if you ever encounter, if you're wanting to reach out to somebody that's really going through a hard time, think of what you can do for that person. Just do it and be like, hey, I've done this for you. Can I bring this by? Damian Taylor's showed up at my door with Aventones and a Mac Pro. And I told him I didn't have time to install everything on the Mac Pro. And he texted me and he was like, I'm going to come back and get that Mac Pro and you tell me what plugins you need and I'll put it on there. And those are the things that are helpful. And that's not that's not a critique on anybody. Somebody might hear this that said, hey, is there something I can do? It's not a critique because before this experience, I probably would have done that. I probably would have been like, hey, let me know what I can do. But now that I've been through it and I've seen what's helpful and what's not helpful, that's helpful, doing something. And just like, even if it's something small, like let me grab your groceries or whatever it is. But when you offer something that is already a thing, that person immediately becomes more open to it. They don't have to think about it. They just say yes or no. And so I guess that would be my thought for next time someone is in a dark time. Just do something.
Yeah. So also, I just, I want to reiterate, if you, as Audio Pros audience, if you've been procrastinating on, getting insurance or, taking pictures of your stuff or backing stuff up or cleaning up your studio or getting your shit together entirely, 30 minutes a day, every day, dedicated to that thing, or an hour a day if you can spare it, dedicated to that thing. Couple weeks go by, you will have made significant progress.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And speaking of insurance, I forgot to mention this earlier. Like my insurance for my equipment, it was replacement cost. So if that's how your insurance is, and this would apply to you, you could put the tax amount in there too. Because when you go through the thing, they go back and forth. So basically how those replacement cost things work, at least in my situation, was they will pay up to the replacement cost. And so like if you bought something for $399 plus tax, and then you put $399 on as the replacement value, they are willing to pay the tax. They calculate it in the math, but then you hit that $399 max and then you don't get that tax. Or things get more expensive. I mean, I bought my Pro Axe for like $2,400, $1,800, like 12, 15 years ago, and they are $4,000 now. So that's a big loss for me because wow. I'm only going to get whatever number I put down. So if you've had things on your list for a long time, just double check that you can still replace that item for that cost, because I didn't realize how much audio gear has gone up until I started doing this insurance battle.
I just want to get into the language of that for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say, my RE20 is sitting here in front of me. Okay. So let's say I paid $350 for an RE20, but they will do replacement cost. But what if replacement cost today is $500? Can you just say replacement cost is $500?
So the way my policy was written and worded is they will pay up to the insured value.
Gotcha.
I don't know if every policy is like that, but that's how mine was. So, and what they did was I sent them the items that were lost, and then they sent me back the replacement item, the purchase price, plus the tax, and then the overage amount. So it's like, okay, so to replace this item, it costs $3,000. you had it insured for $1,200, you have an $800 overage. So then you get this like total amount, and then they subtract the overage from it, and then you get what's left over, if that makes sense. I don't think I described that properly, but yeah, so I definitely lost out a fair bit on plenty of things.
So that's something to keep in mind. So like, for example, vintage gear, let's say you had a Fairchild. Let's say you bought the Fairchild 20 years ago.
Yeah.
They sure as shit aren't going to give you its current, market value, which is probably, I don't know. I think Fairchilds go for pretty high, nearing the 6-figure mark now.
Yeah. So yeah, if you have items like that, consider doing some appraisals and re-upping your insurance, because every year you renew it, right? So you can just change the value. I think when people look at insurance, they think like, why am I going to pay this? This is just a loss. But when it happens, when you actually need to use it, the insurance company is the one that ends up at a loss, because I've been paying for gear insurance for 10 years and they're going to give me significantly more money than I've given them.
All of this too, I have to say, and I'm speaking just from my own quirks, I tend, and I'm sure a lot of you are like this, I tend to gravitate towards the things that interest me and are fun to pay attention to. And instead of, sometimes I will overlook the details of things like an insurance policy. So it's really important to not do that. It's important to understand the things that you're getting involved in, and understanding, why am I paying $1,200 a year for all this insurance? What does that cover? And do not make assumptions that, oh yeah, we had some flood damage, so I'm just going to call the insurance company. And it will be very disappointing to discover you are not covered in particular situations.
Yeah. Flood in particular is generally not covered for things. I don't think it's in my, I don't think it's in my homeowners or my equipment policy.
Right. And, with all this crazy rain and water I was dealing with yesterday, it did cross my mind. I thought, God, what if this gets out of hand and then like my studio fills up with water? Then what? Yeah. And I thought, maybe I better go check the policy out just in case.
I can't remember what it's called. You want the certified copy with addendums or something. That's wrong. But yeah, ask for the full language. If it's less than like 3 pages, then you don't have it.
I know you got a lot of shit to do, and I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking about your experience, because it's a stark warning to all of us that this could happen to any of us at any time.
Unfortunately, yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be, a disaster. Like it could have been a candle that a client left on in the bathroom or something, I do my podcast, and this is now part of my story. And so I guess I get to tell the story of starting over after 20 years. And I think there's going to be a lot of value for somebody in that story, because I'm really going to try to lay out the decisions that I'm making and why, and why I would continue to use this equipment, and why I loved this equipment, but I'm not going to replace it, things like that. So you can really think about how you want to make your studio and how you want to like curate your collection, because this industry is extremely expensive to participate in, and also extremely difficult to be profitable in. So I hope that I can just help people make the best decisions possible to be able to have a career here and not, buy 4 fair children.
Fair children. That's Fairchild plural.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, on that note, while we're still smiling, let's wrap it up.
Matt, it was good hanging, man. Thanks so much for having me.
It goes without saying, I'm here. Anything you need, whatever.
I appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Happy to back you.
Thanks, man.
All right, man. Well, you take care.
Cool. See ya.